been a lot of pushback. People say that's hyperbole, it's a misuse of the term. You're an international human rights lawyer, you're at the UN for 3 decades. Make the case briefly to our viewers for why you believe what we're seeing in Gaza right now meets the legal definition of genocide.
Well, thanks, Mehdi. First of all, my critique was not of the entire UN, and I want to be very clear that I am not criticizing those heroic humanitarian and human rights workers on the front line, the dozens, for example, of UNRWA workers who've been killed under Israeli bombs in the last few weeks. And in fact, people who work for the UN all over the world who are very serious about the norms and standards of the organization. My critique is about the political side of the House in the UN, and I really believe they've abandoned those workers as well as abandoning people on the ground. I know that genocide is a very politicized term. I know it's often abused. It is, because of the politics, sometimes denied where it exists and asserted where it does not exist. But strictly as a matter of international law, there are a couple of exceptional things here. One is the number of specific acts in the UN Genocide Convention that have been perpetrated by Israel against the civilian population of Gaza, including intentionally causing serious harm, including bodily harm.
constant refrain in some circles since the start of this conflict between Hamas and Israel. There's no difference between Hamas and the people of Gaza, because the Gazans elected Hamas, to quote Republican Senator Tom Cotton. The citizens of Gaza voted for Hamas, to quote once Liberal lawyer Alan Dershowitz. That's just false, incorrect, untrue. First, half the population of Gaza are kids under the age of 18. The vast majority of them were not alive, let alone old enough to vote the last time elections were held in Gaza back in 2000. Supported Hamas. There's a health ministry, at least 9,770 people have been killed in total since October the 7th, including 4,008 children. In Washington, D.C. on Saturday, huge crowds of protesters turned out to demand the Biden administration call for a ceasefire and an end to the fighting. And last week, a senior UN official in the New York office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights quit the organization, denouncing the UN's failing stance on the conflict. In his resignation letter, human rights lawyer Craig McIver, who worked for the UN for 3 decades, referred to the, quote, wholesale slaughter of the Palestinian people and described it as a textbook case of genocide. In a statement to The Guardian, the United Nations responded to McIver's statement, calling them his personal views and saying in part, quote, the position of the office on the grave situation in the occupied Palestinian territories and Israel is reflected in our reports and public statements. Craig McIver joins me now. Craig, thanks so much for coming on the show. You left the UN last week, and in your last letter to your boss, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, you attacked the UN for failing to stop the war in Gaza, and you called what Israel is doing a textbook case of genocide. Now, you know that's an explosive accusation for many. There's been a lot of pushback. People say that's hyperbole. It's a misuse of the term. You're an international human rights lawyer. You're at the UN